So when we combine both factors, number one, more MOP flats entering the resale market and also a strong BTO pipeline, it is expected that HDB price growth will be more muted in 2026 compared to the previous years. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's topic is very apt as this year we have a huge influx of HDBs coming to MOP, almost double that of last year at 13 over 1,000. So if you're a HDB owner who's reaching your MOP or if you've just crossed it, chances are this question has already crossed your mind. Should I upgrade now or should I wait? And if you're feeling stuck, confused or even a bit pressured by the market noise, you're not alone. Some people are telling you to rush and upgrade before prices go even higher. Others are telling you to wait because the market feels uncertain. And somewhere in between, you're trying to make a big financial decision that affects your lifestyle, your cash flow, and your long-term plans. So in this video, I'm not here to tell you that everyone must upgrade. I'm definitely not here to push you into a decision before you're ready. I've worked with many HDB owners at this exact stage. Some upgraded immediately, some waited, and some chose not to upgrade at all. And the right decision was different for every one of them. So instead, I want to walk you through what reaching MOP really unlocks for you by assessing unlock sales proceeds and income levels for the three different categories and see which is more applicable to your case. And what it means to save and wait versus upgrading now. The real options you have, and not just the popular ones, to stay put and do nothing, to upgrade to a bigger and more central HDB, to upgrade to a new EC, or even upgrade to a private property. And most importantly, how to think about upgrading in a way that fits your life stage, finances, and timeline. Before we even talk about whether you should upgrade, the first thing you should assess is when your HDB reaches MOP is that how much value can you actually unlock from your current home? Because the number will determine what options are realistically available for you. Now, everyone's situation is different, so for illustration purposes, I'm going to use simple, realistic figures just to demonstrate this concept. And just take note, this is not a one-size-fits-all calculation. So let's assume you and your partner bought a BTO 5 years ago at $400,000. Today, after reaching MOP, the indicative market value is $800,000. Your outstanding loan is $264K, and over the past 5 years, your combined CPF use, including accrued interest, is about $200,000. And you still have $80,000 combined CPF in your OA. If you sell the flat at $800,000, you repay the outstanding loan, CPF use plus the accrued interest is refunded back to your CPF, and after accounting for all these, your estimated net cash proceeds could be around $320,000. And again, this is a simplified instruction to make the discussion easier to follow. After selling your MOP flat, you're potentially looking at $320,000 in cash proceeds, $200,000 refunded back into your CPF, plus your existing $80,000 in CPF OA. So that gives you altogether $320K cash and $280K CPF in total. So now the real question becomes, what can you actually do with this combination of cash and CPF? And how do different upgrade paths affect your risk, cash flow, and lifestyle? So that's what we'll break down next. Now, once you understand how much cash and CPF you can potentially unlock, the next step is to contextualize it against your income and risk profile. To make this easier, I'm going to break this down into three broad categories. And this is not to label anyone, but it's just to help you see which planning lens may apply to you. So of course, everyone's situation is different. Some households may have more moderate income, but very strong cash and CPF savings. Or higher income, but heavier commitments. So think of these as categories as guides, not rigid boxes. So first, we have category A, which typically includes households who are more cash flow sensitive, more risk averse, and prefer stability over stretching. They usually want to stay put or upgrade without increasing financial stress. So let's assume a couple, both around 35 years old, both have a combined monthly income of $10,000, about $5,000 each, and an existing car loan of $1,200. Using these assumptions, based on the current loan frameworks, their private property loan can go up to $900,000 thereabouts. For a brand new EC, their loan can go to about $600,000 to $620,000. And for HDB, they can loan up to $568,000. So again, these are illustrative figures for comparison. So now if we combine this with what we unlocked earlier, $320,000 in cash proceeds, the $280K combined CPF, that's roughly around $600,000 in cash and CPF available. Realistically, this category may be looking at private property around the $1.4 million range after factoring the stamp duties. We can also look at a new executive condo, which may be feasible with the bridging or deferred payment schemes. I've covered this in my Coastal Cabana video previously, which I'll link right below. Or HDB resale, around the $1.1 million range. For category A households, the focus is usually keeping the commitments manageable, preserving for emergency buffers, and upgrading without over-leveraging. There's no wrong choice here, only what fits your comfort level. So now beyond the purchase price, the next thing Category A households really look at is the monthly cash flow. So if we take a private property in the $1.4 million range, your monthly mortgage could easily be around $3,000 or so, depending on the interest and loan structure. So not forgetting other expenses like maintenance fees and the higher property tax. Now layer that together with an existing $1,200 car loan, the daily household expenses, and for many families with 1 or 2 children, suddenly your monthly commitments can start to feel quite tight. And on top of that, in the $1.4 million private property segment, options are much often skewed towards much older developments or located further out from the central areas. So whether this works also depends on your family needs, the proximity to schools, the commute time, as well as your lifestyle preferences. So for many in this category, this starts to feel like a stretch unless you are extremely disciplined with savings or very comfortable with tightening expenses. So now for brand new executive condos, that's another practical consideration. Before you sell your HDB, you typically need to fund the initial down payment. So if your cash and CPF are still locked inside your current flat, your ability to buy a new EC depends heavily on, whether you are already having a strong buffer in savings and also having access to the bridging and loan and also the deferred payment scheme. This is why EC upgrading is often more sensitive to timing and other criteria and not just the affordability. And because of all these factors, households in Category A resale HDB is often the safest and most balanced option. At around 1.1 million or even lesser, you could potentially move into a more central location or upgrade to a larger unit such as a 5-room flat or even an EA, all while keeping your monthly cash flow comfortable and sustainable. And there's nothing lesser about this choice, right? A good upgrade is not just about stretching to the maximum, choosing something you can live with peacefully for the long term. And at the $1.1 million price point for HDB, the monthly installment at around $2,200 thereabouts for Cat A will be less stretched as well, depending on whether you have other family or self-financial commitments. So next up, we have Category B, what I call the comfortable but cautious group. So these are families or couples who can upgrade but only with proper planning. Typically, they have a good balance of CPF and cash and are often dinks or have child or children, which makes timing very important. So for those with kids, selling first and then waiting for a new launch is usually not very practical, so most will need to sell and buy concurrently. So now for comparison purposes, let's assume the same age as Category A, 35 years for both, and they have a combined income of around $16,000 or $8,000 each, and they also have a car loan of $1,200. At this income level, brand new ECs are on the table since the income ceiling for ECs is $16,000. But whether it works depends on deeper calculations, especially the initial down payment and whether a deferred bridging loan is required. If you look at the private property route, this profile can generally take a loan of up to $1.6 million, potentially higher if bonuses are factored in. So that puts the purchase price at around $2.1 million. With a sell-buy concurrent strategy and assuming total CPF and cash proceeds amount to about $600,000, most buyers at this level can usually cover the down payment and stamp duties without topping up extra cash. And realistically, at this $2.1 million range, you're looking at 3-bedroom in the OCR or city fringe locations. So this is also where personal priorities come in, like schools, proximity, and the commute as well as the lifestyle. Monthly installments will be about $5,400, and once you factor in maintenance fees, the property tax, you're looking at roughly around $6,000 per month. So yes, this upgrade is absolutely feasible, but it really comes down to your comfort level, your other commitments, and whether you're happy with committing the amount monthly into housing. As for upgrading to a larger HDB, that is usually not an issue at all for this category, so I won't dwell too much on that. Category B isn't whether you can upgrade, it's about how safely and comfortable you can do it. Lastly, we have Category C, households with strong income and asset readiness. We'll assume again the same profile, 35 years old, same car loan of $1,200, but this time with a higher combined income of around $20,000 per month. At this level, the upgrade potential is very strong, and more importantly, the opportunity cost of waiting becomes much higher, especially if prices continue to move upwards. So for this scenario, the maximum loan you can take comfortably is around $2.2 million, which means that you can afford properties of up to $3 million, assuming total cash and CPF proceeds of $600K again, and you still have sufficient funds to top up for down payment. The $3 million price point, the choices become very attractive. You're no longer limited to the entry-level units. You can look at the larger format for 3 bedrooms, potentially even 4 bedrooms, even in central locations. Of course, the main consideration here, number one, the higher down payment quantum and how much cash top-up you're comfortable with at this level. Number two, the higher monthly mortgage and costs, say around almost $8,000 per month. So for this category, EC is no longer relevant because at this price point, income ceiling exceeds the current requirement. As for HDBs, there's also not much to discuss. You can easily afford newer MOP flats, even in prime locations like Queenstown at around 1.6 billion thereabouts. Ultimately, for Category C, the question isn't affordability, it's rather it's where you want to allocate your capital. So are you buying this as a long-term asset that forms part of your wealth planning? Or do you prefer to keep your lower monthly mortgage commitments and deploy your money into other investments? Just to be clear, these three categories are benchmark examples meant for illustration and comparison only. So your income might sit somewhere in between or even above these figures, but every household is different. That's why the right decision always comes down to the comfort level, the priorities, and the long-term strategies. So I would say at higher income levels, upgrading is no longer about can you buy? It's about what role this property plays in your overall wealth plan. So next, let's talk about the opportunity cost if you're considering an upgrade but are undecided between acting now versus waiting. So rather than go too far back, we'll focus on a recent and relevant 10-year window from 2015-2025. As we're only at the start of 2026 and the data is still limited, this gives us a clearer and more practical reference point. So if we look at price trends and annualized growth rates over this period, the HDB prices grew at around 5.27% per annum. New ECs recorded the strongest growth at around 11.7% per annum. New private condos followed closely at around 11.5% per annum. And for landed properties, they grew roughly at around 6.4% per annum. In terms of the resale private condos, it saw a total price increase of around 44.76%, translating to around 4.48% per annum. While some of these double-digit annualized returns may look very attractive, it's important to recognize that this is over a 10-year holding period. So if we zoom into shorter time frames, returns are not always linear and can vary significantly. Over the past decade, of course, the market has gone through multiple cooling measures, including additional layers being introduced over time, as well as major global events such as COVID and other geopolitical and economic disruptions. So naturally, this has resulted in cycles of ups and downs rather than straight line growth. The intention of this slide is not to project future returns, but to present a conservative, fact-based view of how different housing types have performed over a meaningful time horizon. So by looking at actual price trends and movements, you're able to better weigh the pros and the cons, and whether holding on and waiting before deciding your next move, or planning ahead, or upgrading earlier makes more sense for your current situation. So ultimately, this helps you make a more informed, forward-looking decision rather than one that's purely based on sentiment and short-term market noise. Next, let's take a more conservative assumption. So instead of looking at double-digit growth, let's assume a 4% per annum price increase, which I think is a more realistic reflection based on recent years. Last year was relatively slower, so this is a grounded, conservative benchmark. Now for simplicity, let's assume all housing types grow at 4% in a year. So what does that mean in actual dollar terms? For HDB, if your MOP flat is around $800,000, 4% increase translates to around $32,000. For ECs, a typical brand new EC is around 1.6 million and will see an increase of around $64,000. For private condos, a decent 3-bedder roughly is around 2.1 million, and that will mean around an 84,000 increase per annum. And for a landed property, a terrace at around 4 million will see around 160k price growth with this same 4%. So when we put these numbers side by side, the key question becomes this. If you're planning to wait 1 or 2 years to save up, will that price increase materially affect what type of property you can upgrade to? Because while markets do move up and down, from a practical standpoint, we also need to ask, is it realistic for you to save $80,000, 100k, or even 200k in a given year? And if you're planning to upgrade in the next 2 to 3 years, these numbers compound and become even larger. And on top of that, there are also other factors to consider. For example, interest rate cuts, which could further support price growth and potentially widen the gap even more. So now there's no right or wrong answer. So for some, taking 2 to 3 years to save may make more sense, especially if that allows you to comfortably afford, say, a $2.1 million private property. But at the same time, it also possibly means that in 2 to 3 years later, that same $2.1 million may not buy you the same 3-bedroom unit, but instead only a 2 plus study. So that's where the opportunity cost of waiting comes in. But of course, if you're confident of income growth, bonuses, and higher savings capacity in the near future, waiting may actually give you more options, not fewer. So ultimately, everyone's situation is different, and this is why upgrading decisions should always be assessed on a case-by-case basis rather than using a one-size-fits-all approach. For those deciding whether to upgrade now or wait, let's walk through a practical example to quantify the opportunity cost involved. So we'll use the same Category B scenario, couple age 35. Both are earning $8,000 per month and the combined income is $16,000 and with an existing $1,200 car loan. Let's assume they are looking to purchase a property priced at $2.2 million, which is a unit they have already shortlisted and are keen on. So based on their current position, of course their CPF OA is at $280,000 and their cash proceeds are at $320,000. And so that makes the total available to be $600,000. Assuming they have not accumulated additional savings yet, there is still an additional shortfall of around $87,000 in upfront funds required to proceed with the purchase. Right, if they set aside $2,000 per month specifically towards this goal, it will take them around 2 years to bridge this gap. However, the key consideration here is this. While they are saving over the next 2 years, this same $2.2 million property today may no longer be priced at $2.2 million in the future due to inflation and the overall market price movements. That being said, this scenario could still remain feasible if income growth is expected. So for example, through salary increments or bonuses over the next 1 to 2 years, which could increase their savings capacity and help offset the higher price. So this highlights why upgrading decisions are rarely about the affordability today, but also about the timing, the price movement, and the expected income trajectory. So now let's take this one step further. So assuming the couple has a very specific requirement, for example, they want to stay within 1 km of a top primary school, which they are alumni of, but because they intend for their child to attend that school, and as a result, their choices are highly restricted, and they are only considering one particular property. So the purchase price of this target property is $2.35 million, and based on their current income, the same CPF and cash position we discussed earlier, their $280,000 CPF, and their $320,000 in cash proceeds and savings. Based on the current income and the same CPF and cash position we discussed earlier, so that would be the current OA of $280K as well as the current savings of $320K, they would eventually face a deficit of around $245,000 in terms of upfront payments. So let's assume they are extremely disciplined and save $2,000 a month each, or $4,000 per month combined. So at this rate, 5 years, to accumulate enough capital to comfortably proceed with the purchase, assuming no salary increment during this period. So that means they will be 40 years old by the time they are ready to buy. And if their income remains unchanged, their maximum loan quantum may even go down due to a shorter remaining loan tenure. But there's another critical factor to consider. If we apply a conservative 4% annual price growth compounded over the 5 years, the $2.35 million property today will no longer be priced at $2.35 million. In fact, this might be even closer to $2.86 million by then. So while they may have saved enough to afford the $2.35 million, the property they are targeting is no longer at that price level. I'll say this illustrates a key point. When location and school proximity are non-negotiable, waiting doesn't just delay the purchase, it can shift the goalposts entirely. And this is where the true opportunity cost of waiting comes into play. So ultimately, this isn't about whether waiting is right or wrong. It's about understanding that while you may be saving, the target property may also be moving. And that's why your upgrade decisions should be assessed early and realistically, and that's where planning early can make a meaningful difference. So now, of course, everything we've discussed so far is based on hypothetical figures, used purely to illustrate how opportunity cost works over time. And the more important question is, what does the current market situation tell us about whether this year is a good time to make a move or not? So let's ground this discussion in actual recent market data. So if we look at the HDB resale price growth, prices increased by around 2.9% in 2025. And this is a relatively modest figure, and in fact, it represents the slowest annual growth since 2019 after the post-COVID surge. For private properties, prices rose approximately at 3.4% last year, which is also the slowest growth since 2020. While these two segments, HDB and private, still experience slower growth, it's important to note that private residential prices still outpace the HDB resale prices, even in a more subdued market environment. So at the same time, when we look ahead, the supply outlook for new private launches is becoming even tighter, as we can see in this article here. And for the coming year, we're expecting only about 9,500 new private homes, excluding ECs, to be launched, compared to around 11,500 in 2025. This tightening of supply could potentially place upward pressure on private home prices, especially if demand remains resilient. When we put all these factors together, the slower growth in the HDB resale market, but the private property prices still outperforming HDB even in a slow year, and a reduction in the upcoming new launch supply, which could push prices even higher. This naturally leads to the question, is waiting really neutral, or does waiting carry its own set of implications? So ultimately, the decision to upgrade now isn't about timing the market perfectly, but it's about understanding what waiting might cost you and whether making a move earlier gives you more options and flexibility rather than fewer. So beyond past performance, the next question to ask is, how are HDB prices likely to perform this year, and how does that affect the move that you are considering? So one of the biggest factors influencing HDB price growth in 2026 is the supply. So first, we are seeing a sharp increase in the number of flats reaching MOP. So in 2025, about 6,970 flats reached their MOP. So in 2026, that number doubles to 13,400 flats. And that means that there's a much larger pool of resale flats becoming available in the market. And on top of that, the government also has plans, or rather they have announced plans to launch around 19,000 BTO flats this year, which adds further supply and gives buyers more alternatives in the resale market. So when we combine both factors, number one, more MOP flats entering the resale market and also a strong BTO pipeline, it is expected that HDB price growth will be more muted in 2026 compared to the previous years. So that being said, policy decisions still matter. So if, for example, the government does move ahead to relax the 15-month wait-out period, this could bring more buyers back into the resale market and in turn provide some support to HDB prices. So now putting everything together, we are likely to see more resilient or decent price growth in the private residential market, supported by the tighter new launch supply. So while HDB price growth may be more subdued, barring major policy shifts, but even in a scenario where both HDB and private prices grow at similar rates, as illustrated in our previous hypothetical examples, the opportunity cost of waiting still remains meaningful, especially for buyers looking to upgrade, and what more now that we are more anticipating a more muted HDB price growth. So now that we've looked at the market context and opportunity cost, let's take a step back and compare the four main options you can consider moving forward. So there's no universally best choice. Each option comes with its own trade-offs, and right decision depends on your priorities, finances, and long-term plans. So the four options are: number one, you can actually stay put, wander, and do nothing. You can continue holding on to your current property. And number two, you could upgrade potentially from your HDB to another HDB, a bigger one and more central one, perhaps. Number three, you can look at perhaps upgrading to a EC, which is a hybrid option that offers condo-style living at a more accessible price point, but with, of course, the eligibility conditions and restrictions. And number four, we can actually look at upgrading to a private property. That includes both condos and landed homes. So in the next few slides, we'll walk through the pros and cons of each option so you can better assess which pathway aligns with where you are today and where you want to be in the future. So let's start with option one. That's actually staying put and doing nothing. So of course, we have some of the pros. One of the biggest advantages of this is that there's low stress and high stability. So for many homeowners at this stage, the property may already be partially or almost fully paid up. So with both parties working, the mortgage servicing is very manageable, especially in a relatively low loan-to-income environment supported by ongoing CPF contributions. And over the years, there's also likely to be significant accumulation of cash and CPF savings, which gives you strong financial flexibility. In some cases, you may even have enough liquidity to fully redeem the loan if you choose to. So this flexibility ultimately allows you to redirect your cash into other investments or build up a large emergency fund, or even simply enjoy greater peace of mind without over-leveraging. So for some households, that sense of control and optionality is extremely valuable. So of course, there are some cons and opportunity costs as well. So the trade-off, however, is that of asset stagnation. So by holding on and doing nothing, your property may experience slower capital appreciation, which may be, of course, perfectly acceptable for some. There's also the issue of inflation erosion. And because inflation rises every year, and assets such as ECs or even private properties have historically done a better job at hedging inflation over the long term, staying in the same asset could gradually lower your real purchasing power. And lastly, this option may delay wealth compounding. So real estate growth tends to be cumulative, and the longer you stay on the lower growth asset, the more time you may need to later catch up if you eventually decide to upgrade. This doesn't make the decision wrong. It simply means the opportunity cost is time. So who this suits? This option tends to be more suitable for households with uncertain or more volatile income. Or number two, those anticipating the short-term life changes such as major expenses like medical bills, childcare costs, or even caregiving responsibilities. Or individuals who prioritize liquidity and flexibility over asset growth in the near term. That being said, if you're choosing to stay put intentionally, it's important to have clear alternate paths. If this property is not meant to be a core part of your retirement strategy, then there should ideally be other investments in place, whether financial assets or even other business ventures that can help to hedge inflation and also support long-term wealth and retirement planning. The second option would be to upgrade within the HDB market. So there are some pros to this. Of course, one key advantage of this option is that it's lower risk and it's a familiar asset class. So you're staying within an asset class you already understand, in terms of the pricing, the loan structures, the CPF usage, and market behavior. And upgrading to another HDB also allows for more meaningful lifestyle improvements without making the big financial leap. So these improvements may include moving closer, for example, to your workplace to reduce commuting time. It could be living within 1 km of your preferred school for your child, or gaining in larger internal space, better layouts, or even a newer flat. So while these benefits may not always be reflected directly in returns, they can significantly enhance your daily living quality and also your family convenience. And in many cases, this option allows households to improve their housing conditions while still keeping their monthly mortgage commitments manageable, without needing substantial top-ups or aggressive leverage. Of course, there are some cons to this as well. So one major consideration is that upgrading to another HDB means resetting your MOP. This eventually means committing to another 5-year holding period. You can reevaluate your next move. In terms of asset growth, there's also the more limited upsides because historical prices, or rather historical trends, suggest that HDBs generally have more limited upside compared to ECs or even private properties, especially over the longer holding periods. There is also the policy risk over time. So as we can see, over the years, HDB policies can change and may affect future demand and exit. So for example, the introduction of the 15-month wait-out period for private property owners, right-sizing to HDBs, this had a direct impact on the resale demand. These are implemented for market stability. They do introduce an additional layer of uncertainty that buyers need to factor in. So which group does this option suit? This is suitable for, say, families who are upgrading primarily for space or functionality such as the family expansion, caregiving to parents, or accommodating lifestyle needs. They also could be conservative planners who want to improve their housing situation without taking on significantly higher financial commitments. And also lastly, buyers with lower risk tolerance who value stability and predictability over maximizing their asset growth. Overall, upgrading within the HDB market is often a practical, lifestyle-driven decision rather than a growth decision one. The third option is to upgrade to a brand new executive condominium. So some of the pros. So one of the biggest advantages of an EC is that there's a lower entry price compared to a full private property, still offering the condo lifestyle, such as the facilities, the security, as well as the more modern layouts. And of course, historically, ECs have demonstrated strong upside potential, particularly after key milestones like the 5-year MOP, and again after 10 years when the EC becomes fully privatized. So we've seen many past EC projects where owners experience significant capital appreciation upon hitting MOP, with some households recording substantial gains, especially in well-located or well-timed launches. For example, 100 Palms, where a handful of owners exited with more than $1 billion in profit. Importantly, these gains were not isolated cases, but observed across multiple developments. And because of this, an EC often functions well as a bridging asset, a stepping stone for families who may eventually aim to move into, for example, a larger or more central private condominium, or even a landed property. It allows buyers to participate in private market upside progressively rather than making a large leap immediately. There are also, of course, some cons. The main trade-off with an EC, of course, is the longer holding period. Because if you purchase a brand new EC, there is typically a 3 to 4 year construction period before key collection, followed by a 5-year MOP, which the unit must be owner occupied. This means that there's a minimum commitment of around 8 to 9 years before you can fully exit or upgrade. ECs also come with eligibility criteria and restrictions, including income ceiling requirements, citizenship conditions, specific financing and loan structures. And in addition, matters such as the bridging loans, deferred payment structures, and loan optimization are often case by case and require careful and upfront planning. So because of these constraints, timing is crucial when it comes to an EC purchase. So who does this option suit? So upgrading to an EC is generally suitable for the middle income families with a strong intention to upgrade, buyers with a longer term horizon who are not looking to flip in the short term, and households that value facilities and lifestyle such as the swimming pools, the playgrounds, and communal spaces for their children and family. And also for buyers who are comfortable committing for 8 to 10 years with flexibility to hold longer if market conditions are unfavorable. And even after reaching MOP, owners are not forced to sell immediately. They can choose to wait for better market conditions, they can upgrade to a private property, or even right-size back to a HDB, depending on their life stage and goals. Overall, an EC works best for buyers who see upgrading as a long-term journey rather than a short-term transaction. So the final option is to upgrade to a private property, which can include a private condominium or even a landed home. So one key advantage of the private property is that there is no MOP restriction. While there is currently a seller stamp duty holding period where owners need to hold for about 4 years to avoid SSD, this is different from MOP and offers greater flexibility in the long run. From a capital perspective, Private properties have also historically shown stronger price appreciation, as we've seen earlier, especially over longer holding periods. And this makes private property a common next step for households looking for an asset, or rather an asset progression and wealth building. Private properties also provide a wider choice in terms of the location and the product type, fewer policy constraints compared to HDBs and ECs, and also greater flexibility in terms of future planning, whether for upgrading, downsizing, or even rental strategies. There are of course some cons. The trade-off, however, is the higher financial commitment. So upgrading to a private property typically requires more cash and CPF upfront, as well as a higher monthly mortgage obligation. And this means that households need to carefully assess their holding risk. So a key question to ask is, if one's income stream is disrupted, whether due to career changes or even lifestyle choices, is the mortgage still sustainable? And another consideration is capital concentration. So a large portion of your funds available may be channeled into a single asset, which could limit your ability to diversify into other investments such as equities, your business, alternate assets. This doesn't make private property a bad option, but it does require intentional planning and sufficient buffers. So who does this option suit? So upgrading to a private property is generally for households with a stable or growing income, so also for buyers with a strong holding power and adequate safety net, and those focus on more long-term wealth accumulation rather than short-term flexibility. Also, of course, families who are comfortable committing more capital to real estate as a core asset class in general. So when done prudently, upgrading to private can be a strategic step forward, but it works best when aligned with cash flow, risk tolerance, and long-term goals. So after taking into account everything I've just shared, the market context, the options available, and of course the different pathways you can take, the next question is, how do you actually decide what's right for you? So to simplify this, I put together this mini checklist that you can use as a practical guideline when planning your purchase or upgrade. So of course, every situation is different, and I'm always happy to discuss this further in person or over Zoom to tailor the advice to your own circumstance. So there are 5 key pointers which I usually walk through with my clients. So first would be the income stability over 3 to 5 years. So the first thing is to look at how stable your household income is likely to be. Are you expecting your income to remain similar, grow steadily, or potentially change due to a job switch or a career transition? Understanding this will help you assess whether a move now is sustainable over the next few years. So number 2 is the cash and CPF runway. So beyond the initial down payment, it's also important to have a buffer. And I would recommend at least 6 months of savings to comfortably cover lifestyle and fixed expenses. And this gives you flexibility, especially if there are changes in your job or your family plans. So number 3 is the risk tolerance. So you should ask yourself how comfortable you are if the market doesn't perform exactly as expected in the short term. If prices move sideways for the next 3 to 5 years, are you okay with holding the property longer? Your answer here is very important in deciding for the type of move you want to make. So number 4 are your family plans and lifestyle costs. So at this stage of life, many people are planning for children or already have young kids. Expenses such as childcare, education, a car, a helper, and all these medical costs all add up. And this should be factored into your overall financial planning before committing to a larger property purchase. And finally, of course, we have the holding period. So property is not like holding stocks. It's not something that you can flip in weeks or months. You should be looking at a minimum 4 to 5 year time horizon, or ideally longer. I always encourage clients to see property as a long-term forced savings plan and a wealth building tool rather than a short-term trade. So this is the checklist I use to guide my clients, whether it's deciding to upgrade now, plan for later, or stay put for the time being. Now we've come to the end of this video. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to leave a comment in the section below, because I do read and respond to them. Do note that the content shared today is meant for educational purposes. It all depends on your current situation. And if you found helpful, and would like to stay updated with more market insights and property content, do remember to like and subscribe. And if you have questions specific to your own situation, my contact details are here via WhatsApp, and you're always welcome to reach out for a one-to-one discussion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.